morning, everybody. We're just going to wait for a minute or two whilst others log on. Please be patient with us. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, where we'll be putting the ANC, the DA, and the EFF in the hot seat over their proposals to fight corruption in local municipalities. My name is Kavisha Pillay. I am the head of campaigns at Corruption Watch, and I'll be your moderator for today. We are joined by three panelists. We have Silius Brink from the DA, who is the Shadow Minister of Kokta, and Fighter Kanya Eza, who is an EFF MP and alternate member of the Portfolio Committee on Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. We were meant to have a representative from the ANC, Mr. Aaron Maluleka, who is the Deputy Chair of the ANC in Swane. He is a bit late to the party, so you can draw your conclusions from that, but we'll keep phoning him and hoping that he'll be able to join us so that you can ask your questions and pose your comments to Mr. Maluleka on the ANC's proposals. Now, as with all of our webinars, please make use of the chat function where you can pose your comments and questions to all of the candidates. We will be monitoring this chat throughout. And just an appeal to the speakers to keep the answers very short and brief, because we only have 1 hour and we'd like to get through all of the questions from the panel, from the audience members. This webinar will be recorded and you'll be sent an email with the recording after this event, and it will also be uploaded to Corruption Watch's YouTube channel. And then lastly, you can tweet about this event using hashtag #LocalGovFriday and tag @corruption_SA. If you see in the panel on the right-hand side, there are files for you to download. The one is a pocket guide to understanding local government. The next is Corruption Watch's trends analysis in terms of where the hotspots for corruption in the municipalities across the country. So with that, I think we can get into engaging with our speakers today. We are about 15 days away from local government elections, and we know that local government is at the coalface of service delivery, but it's also riddled with corruption. Since our inception at Corruption Watch in 2012, we've received over 5,000 complaints about corruption at the local tier of government, and most whistleblowers are telling us about rampant levels of bribery, procurement corruption, employment corruption, abuse of power, as well as embezzlement of funds. So given that corruption is one of the main reasons why municipalities fail, each of the parties that are represented here today have highlighted their proposals to deal with this issue in their manifestos. Now let's start with the EFF. The EFF manifesto is based on the party's 7 key pillars, and the last one aims to bring open, accountable, and a corrupt-free government to the South African people. The document outlines a plan to create self-reliant municipalities by doing away with the current tender system and insourcing most support services. The EFF says that it commits to building capable municipalities and strengthening law enforcement to fight corruption by establishing anti-corruption units, broadening community oversight mechanisms, and increasing internal audit capacity. Now, Fighter Eza, can you briefly, no more than 5 minutes, take us through these proposals and why the EFF believes that these proposals will actually mitigate the corruption risk being experienced in municipalities?
No, thank you very much, presenter. I didn't catch your name, but you'll forgive me there. You have also said my name and my party, so I won't waste time on that. And thank you to the viewers at home. The reason why we are here in our fight for anti-colonial, anti-neoliberal system anti-capitalist and a socialist looking forward organization such as the EFF needs to rid society of apartheid corruption, as it were, and needs to rid itself of the ANC corruption, but also it needs to rid itself of a DA corruption that is mostly connected to people that are in the legal fraternity that are often seen by the whistleblowers that are not protected under their jurisdiction. We will go through it as we go. That how does this then pan out? We are saying that at a level of the seventh pillar of the EFF, accountable government, because the current rot of local municipalities is enveloped by corrupt crop of leadership in municipalities, and at the center of that is the tendering system. The Auditor General has said this over and over again and has given us 88 dysfunctional municipalities. And at the center of that is a tendering system that is corrupt and corruptible on its own. And so that's why you'd find that there's internal tensions, political tensions, and then there's there's political influence. That is from the ANC structures, which are political structures, to the administrations of those municipalities. And the Auditor General even goes on and say that then there are repeat offenders in terms of the Section 139s of the Constitution, that they are not functioning themselves, because even the people that go there, they go with interest of being CFOs, of being all those things, and really that system has to be eroded and replaced with insourcing of all those people that are needed, or of all those skills that are needed within the municipality in order to drive a free municipality, and that is self-sufficient. But it's not going to be self-sufficient if the division of revenue of the these things, the revenue that is raised nationally is not addressed. That municipalities are getting just over 10% of the fiscus, and you are hoping that because that particular narrative is saying that local municipalities, given their historical background, given the capacity of the infrastructure, is going to be able to raise its own revenue, and you assume that would be the case, and you then allocate it according to a universal formula that will then work even in municipality. But also you'd find disparities between your metros. You'll find disparities between your metros, districts, and your local municipalities, and you find like in Amatole, people have not been having water in Amatole for a very, very long time, since before 2016, and you find those issues still persisting, and you ask yourself, what kind of leadership that then obtains there? Are we recycling ourselves through elections and go back and forth to repeat the same thing all over and over again and expecting different results? That is a problem of local government. That is a problem of South Africa. And we are urging communities to put value in their vote for a change. To say that I cannot refuse to go to vote for someone that is not going to add value to you, that is not going to listen to you, that's not going to be accountable to you. It's of no use for communities to then continue to do that, because we are not going to change the circumstances of our people for any better. We are just going to speak about it and not implement it. And hence, this is why the EFF was formed. It was formed out of out of an urge to change the conditions of our people and change them for the better and for equal society to obtain in South Africa, so that you integrate communities themselves. The communities must be integrated in essence, not in some narrative somewhere.
Can I just probe you on that point in terms of community integration? Because there are some comments that have come through in the chat, but we'll get to that in a bit. But your manifesto speaks a lot to public participation in broadening community oversight. And practically, what does that mean? When you're saying broadening community oversight or including public participation, if I had to vote for the EFF, what does that mean in terms of my involvement in the functioning and running of my ward or municipality?
The first thing, you must vote for people that are accountable to you as the public. You must not vote for people that will then disappear after elections. There must be an internal process of the EFF that speaks to those people that are elected in confidence by our people, to say that how many indigenous houses have been then registered thus far, and what are the issues that have been resolved on quarterly basis. So that has to do with them having to keep the connection with the people. Their IDPs must speak to the issues that they have collected from the ground before elections, which are finding expression currently in the manifesto of the EFF, and they must be seen to have time frames, and they must be seen to have been executed, and there must be consequence management in terms of that. You see, for instance, now if you are not doing anything right now, there is consequence management for anything in the EFF in terms of whatever we do, whatever we have to do, whatever participation that we have to have. Even at a committee level, there is no way you are going to keep quiet there and receive the money of the people without consequences. So that's what that means, that the IDPs should be seen to be implementable and be implemented. And if you look at the IDP of those municipalities of the ANC and everyone, there's a lot of backlog there because they were not genuine in the first place. They were cooked somewhere on top of the desk, meaning nothing.
Thank you, Vita. Audience members, please, this is a hot seat event. I encourage you to post your questions, comments. We have this opportunity to engage with leadership in the DA and the EFF, hopefully in the ANC as well. So please keep those questions and comments coming. Mr. Brink, so let's touch on what the DA manifesto says. It makes a commitment to eliminating corruption, adopting best practice in good governance, as well as improving appointment practices to reduce cadre deployment and corruption in procurement. The DA wants to establish a supply chain management policy that implements rigorous financial checks. In an effort to increase transparency as well, the manifesto promises to open up tender processes and council meetings to encourage public scrutiny. So again, in 5 minutes, can you just take us through what some of these proposals mean practically? And if you were to rank them in terms of their importance, which of these proposals do you think the DA will prioritize?
Right. Because the ANC is not here, maybe the EFF and the DA can speak for a little bit longer. I certainly think that's what happened in the first instance. Let's just diagnose the problem of corruption before we get to the solutions, if you'd allow me, because we have to understand the background. And I think the background of the breakdown of municipalities starts with the ANC policy, formal policy of cadre deployment adopted in 1997 at Maikeng. And what it does is it obliterates the dividing line between party and state, because it involves the deployment of party agents, not in political support offices, but in technical positions that requires expertise that are not necessarily political. This is not just municipalities, it's departments, constitutional institutions. And the purpose of this, not according to the DA, according to internal ANC documents, is to gain control over what it calls the levers of power, not just of the state, but of society in general. So this has established a clear Leninist ambition to for one party to control every aspect of the state, But it's also led to internal ANC faction fighting spilling over into municipalities. You get a municipal manager, for example, that's aligned to one faction, the mayor aligned to another, and that causes chaos. And if you want to see what this means in the worst degree, go to the northwest. So that's the background. But in essence, I think more pertinently, first, you have a loss of skills in municipalities, a breakdown of internal expertise, and that there's pressure to outsource more and more functions to contractors that have political connections. And because the procurement system is compromised, you get the practice of tenderpreneurship. So your municipality can't get value from officials working for it, and your municipality can't get value from the tender system. And so everything breaks down. The second problem is when you look at specific allegations of corruption and misconduct against officials, the decision to take disciplinary action and to suspend and so forth has been politicized. It goes to council. Councillors have to vote. Do we suspend? Do we investigate? And then lastly, I think the capacity of national law enforcement, the NPA and the Hawks, really affect the ability of municipalities and mayors who want to get things done and get the right things done to get the bad apples out of the system. So, let me just focus a little bit on the second and third point, the obligation of councils to investigate irregularity. So Section 116 of the MFMA, I think, says that councillors can't sit on tender committees. So it's clear that councillors have an oversight role. They're not meant to be involved in tenders. But now you get allegations of misconduct against an official. If that official is politically connected, he can play factions inside the council off against each other. So as when it comes to a vote, do we suspend, do we investigate? It never happens. And this is a serious problem. It's going to become more of a problem with coalitions, because now officials are going to play parties off against each other, not just ANC factions. They're going to try at least. And so your disciplinary processes become ineffective. Then let's just look at the police going after corruption and getting convictions. It's very difficult to prove corruption, the elements of corruption. The same with fraud. And so we've got in the MFMA, in Section 173, a statutory crime called financial misconduct. Far easier to prove, and because we already have the rules and regulations of reporting to the Auditor General, to the public, the monthly and quarterly financial and supply chain management reports, in theory, it should be easy to nail corrupt municipal bosses and even councillors for criminal financial misconduct. The problem is it's not happening. The DA asked the Minister of Justice, since 2016, how many people have been convicted on Section 173 criminal financial misconduct? The answer came back, 67 people have been prosecuted, only 9 have been convicted. 9 people have been convicted in a period of 14 years, despite billions of irregular expenditure, crystal clear reports of misconduct by the Auditor General, and so forth. And so clearly there is also a national problem that needs to be addressed. So the solution, we can start with the technical stuff, but I don't think that's where the change starts. The change starts with a change of culture, because culture always wins. Culture eats the strategy for breakfast. Culture eats everything for breakfast. And the easiest way to get a change of culture is to get a change of political leadership at the top. And let me just give you one example. I mean, you might not like Helen Zille, but I tell you what, in 2016, when she was elected mayor of Cape Town, there was a hell of a culture shock in the city of Cape Town. Everything suddenly had to change. Different language was used, different standards of accountability. But that change of culture, that culture shock, is not enough. Then you have to look at the technicalities. Reviewing irregular contracts, easy to determine, look at the reports of the Auditor General. Make sure that the disciplinary steps that have been identified in forensic reports are actually carried through. And the local media has got a role to play in this. You almost never see local papers asking the question, why are disciplinary charges against the municipal manager, for example, not carried through? Then you need transparency in tender processes. Open up the bid adjudication committee, the last step in the awarding of a tender, to public observation. And I think if you do these critical things, you can over time put checks and balances in place to curb corruption. Just one final point. A municipality has to fulfill core functions on its own. It must have internal capacity. So the DA is not in favor of across-the-board insourcing. That's the surest way to bankrupt municipalities, like universities have almost been bankrupt by that policy. But a municipality needs to have the internal skills and expertise to deliver and maintain water, electricity, waste removal. If you don't have those strong internal expertise, if you don't have competent people on the municipality side of the bargaining table, then the municipality is going to be captured. You are going to get service providers writing your SOPs. You are going to get officials colluding with service providers. And when there's a breakdown of services, you won't be able to hold the service provider to account because the contract has been written to favor the service provider. So that culture of professionalism, appointing the best people in those jobs, that is essential if we are going to curb corruption and squeeze value for money from tenders.
Thank you, Mr. Bing. So both the panelists today have highlighted that corruption is a party political issue, putting a lot of the blame at the doorstep of the ANC. But are there more systemic issues that occur within our system? So are there gaps and loopholes within how municipalities are set up that does allow for this corruption to thrive? And I want to focus on that and what you think those gaps are and what your party to address those gaps. I understand what you both said in terms of party politics, but just looking at the way that municipalities are set up and constituted, how we're appointing municipal managers and so on, what needs to change at that level from a systemic approach? Fighter Eza, I'm coming to you first on that one.
No, thank you very much. The first thing we must get to acknowledge that historically, those municipalities were set out for a particular sector in society. That's the first one. The second one is that of the culture that is built within the arrival of Helen Zille and so forth and the DA. And for us, it means that it would have resolved the issues of the disparities between the culture itself that she brought. It would have resolved the issues of the disparities between Gugulethu, for instance, and Bishop's Court in terms of the drainage system, because currently we are in a rainy season now. So you can see that historical burden that's happening there. It still persists. So if you're bringing about a new culture, you need to be alive to that situation. That you need an integrated settlement, and you need it in essence. That's the second. The third being that you want to intensify the internal audits of a municipality, so that they are not over reliant on external service providers, because every time we do that mistake in South Africa, we are saying that we are not concerned about the plight of the people. We are concerned about a middleman. Look at the manner in which we have structured the water boards, and we have structured the manner in which electricity is distributed in our communities. Someone is in the middle. He's buying in bulks, and anyone, even you can go to the programs of the municipality like CWP, the most corrupt of them all, with workers at the end who are now getting 700 there, while the middlemen in the form of the NGOs are pocketing a lot of money, including your officials within the Department of COGTA. So you need to intensify the level of accountability within that the departments, and then you need to erode all incompetent because we know some of them, they go in there, they go through sex, they are employed through sex, not through qualifications. So you need to take people through those issues and take them through a process, a transparent process that will say, South Africans, we are employing people skills here, and we are closing the skills gap in a local municipality, in a district, and so forth. And so people must be taken anew to a process to say that we are employing people that are qualifying here. It does not matter if, in fact, they are EFF members or DA members. We are concerned about South Africa before there was EFF. We are tired of corruption ourselves. This is why the EFF was formed. It was formed out of an urge to change society, because we historically in 1994 didn't change the material conditions of a people that is said to be a majority, and then the ANC comes and blackmail our people on independence, on an independence that is not a holistic, an independent that perpetuates those that are rich, and those that are poor are getting poor. So we need municipalities that will industrialize, and municipalities that will build industries, which will then give rise to employment, which will give rise to the ability of the residents to be able to pay the services, so that in the ultimate, the municipality is self-reliant, rather than waiting for the municipal infrastructure grant in order to grant the same municipal infrastructure that is manipulated in Emalahleni. They are saying that they have been, there is a case that the EFF has opened, that they are saying they had a mayoral committee, which they cannot prove, in which the attendees of that mayoral are not coming to the party, because they don't know that date of the mayoral committee. So you can see that there has been manipulation of this particular system, in order, because there's no accountability, there's no strong police, and there's no strong justice system that then keeps them to account. Nobody listens to anybody. It's chaos there, and nobody listens to the recommendations of the Auditor General. We ask them every day. Nothing is done. We need to change them. South Africa, we need to change, so that we get a new crop of leadership that is committed to changing the conditions of our people and deliver on service, water, sanitations, and so forth.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Brink, I want to sort of, I'm posing the same question to you, but there's also a comment that's come in from, or a question that's coming from Chris Dobie from the Ethics Institute, where he says that research conducted as part of the Local Government Ethical Leadership Initiative shows that appointment of officials with political connections rather than skills is one of the key issues that undermines ethical leadership in local government. What is all parties' positions on deployment and political influence in the appointment processes? Can I just get your comment on that?
Yeah, and just as to the question of systemic problems in local government, I think I touched on many of those in my first answer, and I can certainly expand on that. And I think really the question raised by the Ethics Institute on the appointment of politicians as officials, effectively, I mean, that's what it means. Recognizing no boundary between the political and the administrative, as has been traditionally established in most working, successful liberal democracies. We have to admit, and I know you want to steer away from targeting parties and so forth, but we have to admit about 90% of municipalities in this country are run by the ANC. And cadre deployment is not a rumor, it's a written policy. It's a written policy that is lived out, and it's got serious consequences. And it is the written policy behind the problem that Chris has identified. Now, I'm not saying that it's only the ANC that is open and affected by corruption. But what I am saying is that it's a policy of theirs that is enabling state capture and corruption. And unless we unless we can get them to abandon that policy, get President Cyril Ramaphosa to sit before the Zondo Commission and admit cadre deployment is wrong, then we're going to have a serious problem in this country. So what should the policy be? I think, firstly, the DA would distinguish between political officers and administrative officers in a municipality. So you do get political officers. You get, your ministerial handbook, for example, at national level, where you admit that someone who holds executive office needs a speechwriter, needs a policy advisor, needs a researcher, needs a personal assistant who they can trust, people who aren't running the water services and the electricity and building the bridges and doing technical stuff. So get a political appointment policy implemented in your municipality for political officers, similar to the ministerial handbook at national level. And that way, you can clearly distinguish between the political recruitment process and the technical recruitment process. And then appointing the best possible people for the job is a crucial element. But unfortunately, it is made difficult by racial quotas that is written up into employment equity law. Not every part of the country has got the exact demographic market for a particular position that reflects the demography of that particular area. To give you one simple example, and this is a requirement of law, the racial classification of people who apply for jobs and so forth. It's not me coming up with these classifications. We have got many very qualified engineering and accounting graduates from WITS, for example, who we desperately need to work in Limpopo and Mpumalanga and the Northwest. And many of these graduates happen to be of Indian descent. Now, you look at the racial targets of appointments in Limpopo and Mpumalanga Northwest, they must reflect the demography of the province. And there, the Indian community is less than 5% of the population. So immediately you put a cap on the ability of skilled South Africans to help out where ordinary communities need skilled people the most, based on a fairly arbitrary criteria. That is a systemic problem that affects the ability of municipalities to get the best skills and expertise. So some of the other problems I think that needs to be expanded upon. Section 166 of the MFMA establishes internal audit units and audit committees that are meant to be independent. Now, the problem is those audit functions don't work. We all have to wait for the Auditor General to come up with his report, or her report. But by the time that happens, all of the irregularity has already happened. So looking at an audit report from the Auditor General is literally looking in the rearview mirror and seeing what happened a year ago. Whereas we need these internal audit committees to spot irregularity and patterns of irregularity inside a municipality earlier, before all of the money is wasted. And the problem with your internal auditor is it's often somebody who's effectively a subordinate to the municipal manager. So how is your chief audit executive going to render an independent report that nails his boss and that would maybe affect his career prospects moving on to a different municipality? So I think one possible solution, but again, unfortunately, this is not stuff that mayors and councillors can do. It's only stuff that can be changed at national level, and that is to make the internal audit functions independent somehow, more like a inspectorate, for example, than just subordinates of the municipal manager. So, in essence, many of the systemic problems is only going to be changed by change of legislation, changing employment equity legislation, procurement legislation, and strengthening the power and the independence of internal audit units, but working within the system. Honest, hardworking mayors and councillors can do a lot of things to get municipalities on the right track. And let's also just acknowledge that not all municipalities in this country are dysfunctional and corrupt and wasting everybody's money. there are a number of municipalities, and you can guess which party controls most of those municipalities. I don't want to score easy political points here, but there are a number of municipalities that do give ratepayers value for money. And if I can just reply to what Honorable Treza has said, if you look at the objective facts, if you look at the reports of Stats SA, everybody, whether you are wealthy or poor, has got better access to basic services in Cape Town and the Western Cape when compared to the rest of the country. No, things are certainly not perfect, but they are far better, because in politics, it's always compared to what. And the information, the independent findings are all on the side of DA-led governments in delivering better services, especially to the poor. But that is...
Mr. Brink, thank you. Just on Lerato, on the chat, she says it's not a strong enough counter argument to designate it to race. It's party deployment. There are thousands of Black unemployed engineers and accountants, which is true. And I also think that dealing with racial inequality is not an arbitrary problem. We know that perhaps the policies in place are not perfect, but we still need to deal with issues of racial inequality and injustice that's very present and prevalent in our country. Also, I mean, I hear your point in terms of, you know, the performance of the DA municipalities, but we also know that, you know, you refer to ratepayers who are treated very well, but, you know, the DA seems to be criminalizing homeless people in Cape Town as well. And various civil society organizations are engaged in legal battles around that. So just to sort of balance it out a bit, I thought that it was necessary to say that. Now, what I want to do is I want to be able to, Mr. Treza, quickly to you. So the EFF is engaged in a number of coalition governments, right? Where one person can be the balance of power. Now, if that person was caught in, you know, involved in corruption and you have to suspend them, basically your party loses that position of power, you lose your balance. So doesn't that then contribute towards, you know, basically ignoring corruption, not holding people accountable because you now want to stay in power and you're not holding those individuals to account for their actions? How do you respond to the mix of coalition governments and potentially putting your party being in power over actually holding people accountable for their actions?
I'm saying to you that there is internal processes of the EFF in the first place. Fundamentally, that is the case. And you are raising an issue of if. And that if you don't have a situation where you don't have those internal processes strong enough to hold the public representative. I'm a public representative of the EFF. I can't be caught in corruption myself. So because I know there is consequence management, there's strong consequence management. So when you go to coalition as a representative of the EFF, we go in there selling our manifesto. So if they agree, in the case that of Johannesburg and Tshwane, if they disagree, and then you would find out the issues, for instance, of insourcing, they are not of DA, those things, but we managed to squeeze their hand there to actually, because what is important in coalition is to understand that no one has absolute power. So you have to be persuaded and not be arrogant in the process. So if you are arrogant and you think that you are leading this particular coalition, you are obviously going to look down on other proposals and only want your own proposals to obtain. And so when you go there, you don't go with arrogance. You go with your manifesto, sell your manifesto, and objectively so you do so, and scientifically. So that you can then say that people can see within a coalition what then the outcome of this particular proposal should be, and I do not think that coalitions should be that difficult if there is no arrogance, and I'm quite certain coalitions can work with sane people and people that are having the interest of the people, not of the party,
So, I
of
mean,
the
but on this
envelope.
question of accountability, so Nikki asks, how do you reconcile any anti-corruption policies with your own EFF involvement in the VBS scandal and the allegations of your own leaders involved in tender irregularities in Limpopo? This is also followed up by Richard, who's talking about the involvement of the EFF in the Joburg City Council transport irregularities. And, you know, these are good questions. You're wanting to make people believe that you're a party of anti-corruption, but your leadership is embroiled in these scandals. What are you saying to people? How do you respond to that?
I'm saying that to people, they need to bring a scientific evidence that implicates the leaders of the EFF in what you call VPS scandal. Most of the people that have been arrested thus far belong to the ANC, and they are from the ANC municipalities, and they are the ones that were involved in such incidents. So we have no, we're not going to interfere in a legal process if there is investigation that then is continuing, and then say that we will base our assumptions on that. There is no EFF member, and there's no scientific evidence. It's just peddling propaganda and lies that you want to involve the members of the EFF in that scandal. And if I'm Ceza and you are Ceza, that does not mean that I was involved in it's just that it's the narrative. It's a white people's narrative in South Africa that we are all the same, and it's bringing that to the fore. That if you are so and so, you are all the same. You act the same, and you are corrupt, and you are all of you corrupt, and it can't be. Without bringing, because we believe in science of Karl Marx. We believe in Franz Fanon, we believe in Lenin. So bring it forward, and then it will be acted upon. The president has said it on numerous occasions. I do not know why it still comes as something that should be always some kind of a cloud that is upon the EFF, because we're all the same in South Africa. Can't be. We must bring to the fore tangible evidence to support these statements that we're saying against the EFF. We are not saying that then someone who is corrupt within the EFF is not going to be acted. We are going to act upon, beginning with the leadership, with the national leadership, going down. Anyone who's caught on corruption will be acted upon. I don't think we'll even wait for the police to do that. We'll deal with that internal. So there's no way.
It's interesting what you say. Sorry, I don't know why there's an echo. But the EFF doesn't really say much in terms of lifestyle audits of its leaders. Why?
The lifestyle of its leaders.
Conducting lifestyle audits.
Let me put it this way so that you understand. The EFF as an organization, there's no individuals here. That's the first place. There are no individuals here. We're a collective leadership of the EFF, a leading society, meaning that as a collective, as a political party, would have to be audited, all of us. And I think that the books of the EFF are clear. They are with the Treasurer General, with the Secretary General, and that lifestyle audit is there in terms of what it is. So I do not think that in terms of lifestyle audits of the leadership of the EFF, anything is a secret. I think they've declared in Parliament, we all declare timelessly what then is our interest.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do, because I don't want to spiral here into a long debate, but there's a few questions, and what panelists, if you don't mind, I want very short answers to this. And then I'm also going to pose a few scenarios to you, give you an example, and tell me what your party would do in relation to dealing with that issue. So Gary asks, do the DA and the EFF support full transparency of bid evaluation and bid adjudication committees? Yes or no? Mr. Brink?
Is it possible that I could just answer on the comments that you made at the end of the last part?
Okay.
Before we move. So just in answer to Lerato, of course, you can't reduce everything to all of the problems to race-based policies. Of course, cadre deployment is part of it. And indeed, there are many black professionals who today do not want to work for government municipalities because they regard it as career death. It's politicized. There are much better opportunities, much better career prospects than working for government and the private sector. But race-based policy is especially in the rural provinces, as I pointed out. And I think communities who don't have water and electricity and who don't have skilled people in charge of these operations would care less about the level of demographic representativity in a municipality than how effectively water, electricity, sewage, and so forth is provided. I also just want to respond to this pervasive idea that the DA only delivers to ratepayers. Because it's at odds with various metrics of what is actually happening. And I want to refer you to the 2019 non-financial census of municipalities published by Stats SA, not the DA, about water, sewage, sanitation, electricity, waste management. And it found that the Western Cape and Western Cape municipalities deliver the most to indigent municipalities of all provinces in the country, indigent municipalities, not ratepayers necessarily, but obviously getting value for ratepayers' money is important because you have to fund these services from something. Do we support open bid evaluation? And it was bid evaluation, which is the other aspect of it?
Bid evaluation and bid adjudication committees. Yes.
So the DA supports the opening of bid adjudication committees to public observation. And this has happened in a number of DA-run municipalities. The argument against opening bid evaluation, although it could be considered, is that opening it up to observation can maybe allow manipulation of the process at an early stage. So adjudication is the last part of a bid. A bid starts with being specified, it's then advertised, it is then evaluated. That's the evaluation committee. The evaluation committee's recommendation goes to the adjudication committee, where more or less a final decision is made depending on your delegations. So we definitely want the adjudication committee to be open to public observation, but I'm not sure opening up evaluation is the best idea, although we could have a debate about it. I think the problem of irregularity in tenders does start in many instances, right from specification stage. When things are put together, tenders are designed for certain companies. And then opening up your process is not going to help at all because you're just going to have all of the bad options. You're going to have one tender crafted for a particular company. But certainly open up the adjudication committee.
Okay, I see that Mr. he's rejoined us, but then whilst he gets back online, Mr. Brink, Gary wants to know, has the DA adopted this level of transparency in any of the municipalities that you are in power?
Yes. So City of Cape Town, City of Tshwane, the bid adjudication committee is open to public observation. But the funny thing is, we find that so few people actually bother to attend. I know in the city of Tshwane, all sorts of arrangements were made, TV cameras and so forth, for people to come and watch. And we expected, maybe journalists or something, but very few people actually make use of that opportunity. But to be honest with you, that's a very small part of what you need to do to clean up your tender process. And I can get into technicalities because I've got some very specific ideas on this, but I also don't want to hog the time here and talk about very minute details.
Thanks, Mr. Brink. Does the EFF support full transparency of bid evaluation and bid adjudication committees?
Bid adjudication for policies, I ask for what?
So, for example...
Because we do not believe in the...
Sorry, sir, can you say that again?
Yes, let's go.
Now, I'm saying, the question is, does the EFF support full transparency in bid evaluation and bid adjudication committees?
And I'm asking myself, bid adjudication for what?
For tenders,
Because
municipal
the EFF
tenders.
does not believe the tenders won't be existing under the EFF. So I don't want to expatiate on that, because that does not exist, bid adjudication, because that system of tenders is corrupt, and it is corruptible, because those that are in power in the municipalities manipulate the system and put their friends, so that they can, in the end, benefit from the profits that are made by these tenders. So you find a tender that has been issued out, but it does not bring value for money. Because the tender, for instance, has not been completed, the company has disappeared, and no one is held to account. So you need to replace it with insourcing of those skills that are needed in the municipality. That's the.
Okay, because I guess that goes back to what your manifesto is saying in terms of overhauling the current tender system. So we're about to wrap up. I wanted to pose a few sort of scenarios, one scenario to each of you in terms of what your party will do if this had to occur in a municipality that you have oversight over. So Mr. Brink, let's come to you. There is a company XYZ who put in a bid for an infrastructure tender in Bela Bela municipality. The bid was higher than others, but company XYZ still got the tender. It was revealed that company XYZ is owned by a family member of a senior manager in the municipality. This is something that's commonly reported to us. What does the DA do in this situation to address that problem?
Right. So the important point is that councillors themselves don't sit on tender committees. That's clear from the MFMA. And that's one of the problems that you have. You're always looking in a rear view mirror. You get these supply chain management reports, and this information is then contained ex post facto, often after the contract's already been signed. So the first question to ask is, was the tender process itself regular? So unfortunately, the way that our national tender laws are written, in some instances, a company that doesn't have the lowest price does get the tender, because there's a different scoring matrix. You know, you've got to look at BEE status and so forth. And the DA is opposed to BEE, but a municipality can't override national legislation. So the crisp first question is, was the tender somehow rigged, or was the scorecard and the specification applied, or the criteria applied, and was it fairly awarded? The second question is, did the senior manager whose family member won the tender, did he disclose his interests? Was he aware of the fact that there was a potential conflict of interest? Because if he did not disclose his interest, that would be a breach of the code of conduct for senior managers, which would immediately trigger an investigation and a report to council to suspend that official pending the outcome of a disciplinary process. So that, in short, would be the DA's response in Bela Bela if this instance of alleged irregularity were to occur.
Thanks, Mr. Brink. Mr. Tleza, so your question is, a municipal manager in a sort of EFF municipality was given a public vehicle to use for a site visit to a local park in Imalahleni municipality. His children from their friend's house and do a whole bunch of other personal things with a government vehicle. How do you respond to that? Because what I want the audience, or what I want to sort of put out there, is that corruption, when it happens, is not just, the big rigging of tenders and, the sort of state capture, the grand corruption. It's also just the everyday abuse of official, of state resources and of state resources. So, Mr. Liasa, what does the EFF do in these types of situations where you have municipal managers who are abusing government resources and public resources? You're on mute, sir. Oh, sorry, we actually can't. We're struggling to hear you. Could you perhaps just try to log on again? Okay, whilst we wait for Mr. Eza, we are about to wrap up. So, Mr. Brink, I'm going to come back to you with your closing statement. Could you just sort of tell us why we should believe that in the next 5 years, things are going to be different from the last 5 years in terms of municipal corruption? Like, what's going to change?
So the simple answer is that nothing is going to change unless there's political change. I think it's very important that residents of municipalities also take responsibility for the fight against corruption and for better services. If for 5 years, for 10 years, the current political party running the municipality where you are, the current mayor, has failed the community, has not been able to account for the spending of the money, things have deteriorated, then it is the responsibility of the citizenry, the voters, to vote for change. And there are very, very optimistic indications that if people do vote for change, things do improve. Very often it takes some time. Not everything is fixed within a 5-year period, but there are two types of municipalities in this country. There are municipalities where ratepayers' money, and I keep on saying ratepayers' money because the money has to come from somewhere, is spent in an accountable way, where there are clean and unqualified audit reports, where the basics are done correctly. And so that municipality has got the space and the reserves to deliver and cross-subsidize services to the poor over a period of time and assist in lifting communities out of poverty. And incidentally, the places that are well governed in this country also have a higher rate of employment. Now, I don't think that's the complete solution to it, but it certainly does push up even economic prospects for residents if municipalities are clean and well governed and safe, and money is properly spent and investors are attracted. And then there are municipalities where the opposite is happening, and unfortunately that's the majority of municipalities. So I do think that if people vote for change, vote for a party that gets things done, look at the DA's track record in government, it is the promise of improvement, of securing a habitable future here in this country, of getting accountability, and just a government that allows one to move up in life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Brink. Mr. Reza, are you with us? Unfortunately, sir, we still can't hear you. I'm not sure what's going on, but I just wanted to thank the both of you for participating in our event today. And apologies to the audience for the no-show of the ANC. You can draw your own conclusions then about their commitments to fight corruption. But we do appreciate your time and your efforts to be here with us today, as well as the questions from the panel, from the audience that came through. Just in closing, we hope that this webinar has been useful and insightful to you as the audience members, that you've been able to get information that will help you to make an informed vote. There will be a few other sort of events coming up from Corruption Watch's side. Next week, we're going to be releasing a 2-part series in terms of a podcast on local government, so please look out for that. Make sure you download the documents that we've shared today, the pocket guide on understanding local government, as well as the trends that we've picked up according to whistleblowers. Next week, Sunday, we have a webinar where we will be engaging with whistleblowers, Cynthia Stimple, the SAA whistleblower, as well as Pumla Williams from the GCIS. She gave quite harrowing testimony at the Zondo Commission about the capture of that department. I've posted a link in the chat, so please do register for that event, which will take place next week Sunday, the 24th of October at 6 p.m. From my side, thank you so much to our panelists, to the audience members. Please stay safe and keep your hands clean from COVID-19 and corruption. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.